Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's the post-game podcast from another Timberwolves win. The Wolves beat Portland on the second night of a back-to-back on the road on Tuesday night. We'll break everything down, including Anthony Edwards' 41-point game. The Timberwolves, great start and great finish, but a sluggish middle. Karl-Anthony Towns foul trouble, and also another huge game from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day. And it's a Victory Wednesday. We'll call it a double Victory Wednesday after back-to-back road wins on Monday and Tuesday. This is the post-game pod for the win over the Blazers. We'll break the whole game down here. Lots to get to. It was a fun game. Uneven, a bit sloppy at times. It was still a fun game. Wasn't quite Wolves Clippers on Monday, but I think Ant's performance and also some of the stuff that the Wolves did in the second half made this a really overall entertaining watch. We'll get to all of it here today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, Nickeil. All right, so coming into this game, second night of a road back-to-back after the big, ended up being a big final margin, but, Wolves trailing at halftime to the Clippers, massive third quarter, pull out the win on Monday. Ant was added to the injury report midday Tuesday with knee soreness, and it sounds like it's similar to the soreness he had a couple of seasons ago. Remember at the end of the year they lost to Memphis in the playoffs, Finch's first year, Ant missed a couple of games, and he just they call it, I think, jumper's knee or something like that is the term for it. It's basically just I can't remember the actual medical term, but I mean, they're calling it knee soreness. So when you're added on the second day of a back-to-back, a lot of times guys don't play. We know Ant very rarely misses games, and so it was not all that surprising to see him play, and he was fantastic. He opened this game aggressive. He had 18 points in the first quarter, shot 6 of 8 in the first frame, 3 of 4 on threes, hit a really nice and one to close the quarter. And Portland was scored too, so the and one was big. I mean, it put the Wolves up 12. The Wolves were up, we're up 12 at the end of the first quarter, but the Blazers kind of kept surging, and it never really expanded over a double-digit lead until that essentially buzzer beater with 2-3 seconds left in the first quarter from Ant. And so it was big to see Ant hit that shot to give them some additional momentum going into the second quarter. And Ant was just this is one of my keys for my key takeaways for the entire game was Ant's decision-making. It was once again on point. And it was very apparent there in that first quarter. The assist numbers weren't as high in this game, but I mean, we'll get back to that later. I want to kind of go blow by blow here a little bit with the flow of the game, because this game was very clearly, I'll call it a tale of two halves. It wasn't first half, second half. It was first quarter, fourth quarter were very good for Minnesota. The middle half of the game, if you will, the second and third quarter were rocky. But Ant got off to a great start. The problem was at the end of the third quarter, Cat picked up his third personal foul. 2 of them were offensive fouls, and I believe they were all the correct calls. Ended up with, on the bench with 3 fouls. Timberwolves had to start the second quarter with essentially nobody that creates offense on the floor. Nas was not on the floor. Cat was not on the floor. Ant was not on the floor. I believe the lineup was Slow-Mo, Monte Morris, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That was your 5 to start the second quarter, which the Wolves are up 12. And I'm sure that this was, Finch was part of it, was like, hey, well, obviously Cat's in foul trouble because normally Cat would come back in the game at that point. Ant had played the entire first quarter, so he was going to sit. And it was like, hey, let's see how this goes. We don't have a whole lot of other options. We're up 12 against the bad team. Let's roll the ball out and see what happens. Well, they were up 12 entering the quarter. By the time Ant came back in at the 6:25 mark, they were up 7. So that lineup was only a -5 over 6 minutes. Like it's fine, right? That lineup has probably literally never played together. I don't think they did on Monday. Conley came in for Monte Morris towards the end of that stint, but Monte Morris obviously in his second game with the team, trying to create some chemistry between him and Rudy Gobert, no doubt. Trying to give both Na and Jaden McDaniels the ability to operate a little bit with the ball in their hands, and it worked out okay. I mean, they got the first possession of the second quarter, they got an alley-oop to Rudy. Nickeil Alexander-Walker hit a 3 in there. We'll talk more about him. He had a fantastic game. Slow-mo looked really good again. The last 2 games, and who knows how much of that is, or really the last 3+ games, how much of that is trade deadline anxiety related, like that being over. But he just looks more comfortable now than he did 2 weeks ago. Hit a 3 on Monday in LA, played well in this game, hit all his free throws. Like it was a good slow-mo game too. So it made sense for Finch to do this. He also didn't have a whole lot of a choice here. And also, like, Rudy's on the floor. Like, he wants to be a higher volume guy. And the Wolves have been force-feeding him the ball a little bit more lately, which they did early in the season. I didn't love it, but it's been working here of late. And I think it's a combination of Rudy's just in better shape than he was last year, and obviously has had an incredible season. His teammates trust him. Also, D'Angelo Russell's not on the roster. So, again, his teammates trust him. And it's not like they're continuously calling post-ups. They'll mix in a couple. Like the first play of the game, they tried to get Rudy a post-up. The very first play of the game in this one. Remember, they tried to do that. Was it the first play of overtime the other night against, I don't know, what was that, a week ago? Whenever they played the overtime game, there was a weird, or no, it was the end of the game when they were trying to get a bucket in that loss to the Bulls. They tried a Rudy post-up. Like moments like that, it's like, all right, maybe we're overdoing this here. But it makes sense to run stuff to try and get him, whether it's empty side pick and rolls or empty corner pick and rolls, side pick and rolls. And, trying to get that action where either his gravity is pulling all the perimeter defenders essentially with him, or he's getting a free roll to the rim with no help from the corner, no help from the low man. And Ant can either, or whoever's operating the pick and roll, could throw a lob or skip pass it to the opposite corner if that help collapses from the weak side. And the Wolves are doing more and more of that, which has been awesome to see. On the defensive side of the ball, early in the game, the Wolves gave up 25 in the first quarter to Portland, which is a very acceptable number. Portland shot the ball okay from the floor in the first half, but Anthony Simons started just extremely hot. Remember, he had a bad shooting night the last time the Wolves played Portland, and his numbers, he didn't actually finish. What was he? He was just 6 of 19, but he started, I don't know what the actual number was, but he was awesome to start the game from the field. The Wolves are trying to be overly aggressive on the perimeter. They actually played high wall, which is like there was their primary pick and roll coverage a couple years ago, and they don't do that often. And it generated a couple of turnovers. And it wasn't just Cat; they did it with Rudy. Their bigs were active out on the perimeter. They also mixed in some zone, which was an interesting. Like I had thought they might try that against the Clippers, or excuse me, not the Clippers. Don't do it against the Clippers. They tried that against the Bucks last week. Or did it a little bit less than I expected them to against the Bucks last week, and obviously they won that game. But it was effective in the first half in this game, less so in the third quarter when they struggled. The Timberwolves struggled, but I thought that was interesting too. And it wouldn't shock me if the Wolves just did a little bit more of that. It's generally not going to be a winning strategy in the playoffs against teams that inherently are going to be better shooting teams. But against a team like Portland, that is, what were they, 25th in 3-point percentage coming into the game. Like it's worth giving it a shot, right? Portland doesn't turn the ball over a ton. They are a good offensive rebounding team, by the way, which would be reason to not play the zone. And sure enough, that's actually what hurt the Wolves a ton in the third quarter. Minnesota lost the rebounding battle in this game. We'll get back to that, but they gave up 12 offensive rebounds to Portland. And part of it was when they were playing in that zone. But overall, the zone worked. The high wall worked early. But I should say the zone worked early. The high wall worked early. The Wolves had a 12-point lead going to the second quarter. That unique lineup cost the Wolves 5 points over the first half of the second quarter. I'm not blaming Finch. Like he kind of did what he had to do, and you got to try those things, right? And the second night of a back-to-back against a bad team, that's the time to do it, right? You're not going to do that against the Bucks the first game after the All-Star break, right? Like that's unless you're completely forced into it by foul trouble. The middle stages of the game were rough, second, third quarter, and then the fourth quarter was massive for Minnesota. I want to talk about the fourth quarter. I want to talk about my key takeaways, including Ant, including Alexander Walker, including Nas will talk about Cat's foul trouble and how the Wolves kind of came out of things toward the end of the game. And then we'll also talk overall stats and individual studs and duds. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Hungry Root. Hungry Root is your partner in healthy living. It's the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality ingredients and groceries and simple, healthy recipes delivered to your door. Take a fun, short quiz, and Hungry Root will get to know your personal health goals, what you like to eat, the kitchen appliances that you use the most frequently, and more. Then they'll build you a personalized cart with all your grocery needs for the week and give you delicious recipe recommendations to put those groceries to good use. My wife and I took the quiz. It's actually a ton of fun to take. And I don't know, it helps get you a more accurate recommendation from Hungry. They'll recommend recipes and groceries based on your personal taste, but each order is fully customizable. Take their suggestions, or you can choose anything you want. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat and seafood, pantry staples, healthy snacks, sweets, ready-to-eat meals, and more. Everything from Hungry Root follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, it's got to be quick to make, and it has to contain whole, trusted ingredients. Save hours planning, shopping, and cooking. Hungry Root delivers food you'll love. Right now, Hungry Root is offering Locked On NBA listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. That's Locked On NBA channel listeners. If you listen to this show or any of the Locked On NBA channel shows, you get 40% off your first delivery plus free veggies. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. 40% off goes a long way. hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link so they know that we sent you. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about the fourth quarter first. So the fourth quarter just became, it wasn't quite what the third quarter was in the Clippers game on Monday, but it was more or less an onslaught for Minnesota. And go into the fourth quarter, Portland actually took a brief lead. I think it was, I can't remember if it was late third or early fourth quarter, but Portland actually took the lead in a game that the Wolves had led by double digits. And actually, let me say this. This is one of my key takeaways, but I'm going to kind of interrupt myself here, and I meant to say this out the top. The overarching theme of this game, besides the first and fourth quarter and the second and third quarter being like a tale of two separate games for Minnesota, is when you're the best team in the league, or one of the best two or three teams in the league, I mean, they are literally the number one team in the Western Conference, you are going to get other teams' best more often than not. And because you're the best team, you're occasionally against a bad team, you're going to blow out some bad teams, right? And you should. But you're also going to get the best effort from bad teams. And Portland's a bad team that has talent. Now, obviously, guys are still missing. But like Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Matisse Thybulle, Anthony Simons, these are all guys that, I mean, they can be, and in some cases have been. Actually, I think they all have been except for Simons. Well, technically Simons has been too. Rotation guys on playoff teams. Like, this is a bad team that has some talent. They play decent at home. They've obviously had injuries. The jury's still out on Chauncey Billups as the coach. But, like, this isn't – it's not Charlotte. It's not Detroit, right? Like, this team has legitimate talent. So you're going to get – and you're going to get the best shot from most teams, even the bad teams. Like, remember when the Timberwolves were bad? A lot of times – and it doesn't take a lot to remember that because it's most of the time throughout their history. But – like, a lot of time, think back to like the Wiggins Towns years, right? With Saunders or the Tibbs years, pre Jimmy Butler. Like, those teams would still, remember when they beat the Warriors in the 73-9 season? Like, you could still give a really good team your best shot because you're a bad team with a little bit of talent, and you might get it. Enough shots fall one night, you make them make enough mistakes, etc. And that's always going to be a thing. Right. And you look at the Wolves the last several games, and we talked about this extensively last week on the Minnesota basketball party. I think we'll talk about it a little bit on today's episode as well. There's some bad losses mixed in there. A week ago, they lost to the Bulls and the sky was falling. And before that, it was the Hornets, and you mix in the Spurs game. But they're all close losses, which is frustrating. But it's because these bad teams are playing their hardest, maybe not their best, but their hardest against the best teams, right? Everybody wants to beat the team that's the best. So like we have to factor that in. And also, and Chris Finch talks about this a lot, but like when you get way up in a game, in this game, they were never, at least not early, they weren't up massively. They were up, 12, 14, whatever, before the Blazers pushed back. It's human nature to slide a little, let things slide a little bit. It's also human nature on the other side to want to play harder against a good team. So I think when we factor that all in, plus the second night of a back-to-back, well, this was rugged and uneven. The way that things played out was certainly understandable. And I want to talk about the overall stats and some of the stuff the Wolves did win here in a minute. But in terms of the fourth quarter, Ant kind of got back on track. He had 18 in the first quarter, was quieter in the middle stages, and finished with 41. He was really good in the fourth quarter. We saw Nickeil Alexander-Walker just go nuts, and that's one of my key takeaways as well. Nickeil had 18 points on 7 shots in this game, 6 of 7 shooting, 5 of 6 on threes, and he got to the line on an and one. His only 2-point attempt was a drive. Well, I take that back. He had 2 2-point attempts. His only 2-point make was on a drive to the basket, and he was fouled, made the free throw, had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block in this game, was a plus 22 in 26 minutes. He was awesome. Got to the point where he hit consecutive catch and shoot right corner threes. The Wolves were just like, Conley was feeding him. Kyle Anderson set a screen to free him up. I don't think it was a set play. It was just like, hey, let's get this dude the ball because he's hot. And then a couple possessions later, the ball gets kicked out to him, and he pump fakes in the left corner and does like a James Harden side back step into a three, one of those James Harden borderline travel step backs, but in the corner where there's no space, and he knocks it down. Everybody goes nuts. The Blazers call timeout. Like, he was just piping hot late in this game. And he's been playing so well for Minnesota. And this was a game Jaden McDaniels struggled, and we'll talk more about that. But Jaden McDaniels wasn't great on either end of the floor. In fact, one of my notes from the first part of the game was the perimeter defense was the biggest difference between the Clippers game and this game. I would say the rebounding and the perimeter defense were the two things that the Wolves struggled with in this game compared to Monday night in LA. And that's what allowed Portland to hang around, the combination of those things. There were too many straight line drives, free runs to the basket for Portland early, and that allowed them to hang around. And Jaden McDaniels was part of that. But I thought Alexander Walker was very good defensively. I'm surprised he didn't get credit with the steal at any point. I feel like he had his hand on a couple of balls. But hot shooting late. And he and Ant were the two biggest reasons late for the Timberwolves to kind of pull away in the fourth quarter. And it really was more just locking in defensively. They played a little bit less zone late in the game than they did early and in the middle stages. And I think Finch pushed the right buttons there. But they made enough threes late. They rebounded well enough late, and ultimately it was the talent that won out in this one. So I already talked about Alexander Walker. Let's talk a little bit about, well, actually, no, let's save Ant for studs and duds. I want to talk about Naz because I don't think I'm going to fit him into studs here, but I want to talk about his game because he played great. With Cat's foul trouble, Cat only played 19 minutes in this game, and I mean, it's because he sat the entire second quarter, I think the entire quarter. Only played like 7 first half minutes, played in the third, and then the Wolves ended up pulling away a little bit, and so he didn't get back on the floor. He did have 3 turnovers. He scored 13 points because he got to the line a bunch, and he was actually a big reason the Wolves didn't allow Portland to build. I don't think Portland ever led by, I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick. I don't think they ever led by more than like 4, maybe 3 in this game. Oh, no, they did lead by 7. I think that was very early. Yeah, it was like right at the start of the game. I think in the third quarter, Portland never got up by a bucket when they did take a brief lead. And a lot of that was Cat. And that's going to get, overshadowed because he didn't play well otherwise. He had 13 points on 7 shots, but he had 3 turnovers and 3 fouls and only played 19 minutes. But by the way, 2 of the 3 turnovers were offensive fouls. But Cat played well getting to the line there. And then Naz, both in the second quarter and then in the second half, he finished with 25 minutes in this game, 10 points on 4 of 8 shooting, 1 of 3. He missed his first couple shots from the field, but after he missed those 2 threes to start, he took the ball to the basket and made a tough layup on his very next shot attempt. Had a couple drives like that in the second half where he just gets to, usually it's to his left. He just kind of throws the ball up on the glass. It's almost like a combination floater layup from like outside the paint, like a weird angle. And I always think he's going to shoot it too hard and not make it, but he almost always makes it and occasionally gets fouled. Was really, really good in this game. 2 assists, a steal, a rebound for Naz, 3 rebounds, an assist, a steal, 2 blocks for Naz Reid. The Wolves had a bit of a block party in this game, 9 blocks total as a team. Portland, by the way, had just 1. Nas was very good. And this was important in this game when some of the other role guys were a bit kind of meh, right? Like Mike Conley, kind of a so-so game for Mike. I mean, he had 3 blocks, which was crazy. There's some weird stats floating around out there about like, I think, I don't remember if it was Alan Horton or Wolves PR that had like Conley's the oldest player under 6'1" to get 3 blocks in a game since John Stockton like 22 years ago or something crazy. But Conley had kind of a so-so game. Towns didn't have a great game. McDaniels had a bad game. So you needed guys like Nas and Na to come up big, and they did. They were really good. They were the best supporting players in this game. I do want to hit studs and duds, some overall team stats from this game. Categories that the Timberwolves won that they don't always win that helped them win this game, and also areas where they struggled to kind of explain, in a different way than I already have, like why this game was close for so long and then why ultimately the Wolves ran away with it. So we'll get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, individual studs and duds here. Obviously, Anthony Edwards was fantastic. We'll talk a little bit more about his game. 41 on 16 of 27. Again, 6 of 8 in the first quarter for 18 in the first quarter. Was 4 of 8 from 3, but he hit 3 of his 4 threes early in the first quarter. He had 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 turnovers, 1 block in this game. The 2 assists, after the last couple games, I think he had 9 on Monday and 8 on Thursday against Milwaukee, Thursday of last week. So the assists were down a little, but I thought the decision making was on point. And one of the assists stands out in my head. It was, I think it was Nas's only made 3. It was in the first half. I think it was late second quarter when Ant had scored on one possession, came down, went to the left side of the floor, kind of got trapped. And instead of forcing it, which he often does, and this is kind of where that helps because teams expect him to force it, he now had at least on this possession, had the wherewithal to stop, pivot, turn, and throw like a one-handed bounce pass, just a perfect pass to Nas, who was wide open for a deep 3. And you need guys to make those shots, obviously, because they're open shots, but also to continually build Ant's confidence in his teammates. And I've never felt like that's wavered. Like Ant always seems to be pumping his teammates up. That's a common theme with Ant, and it's so rare for a superstar, especially a young superstar, to be pumping up his teammates, whether it's Cat or Rudy. But sometimes his play suggests otherwise because he's hunting shots so much. So to see him be so willing to pass, and I know he only had 2 assists in this game, but I think for the most part, he made the right decisions. Now, Ant attempted 27 shots. Nobody else on the Wolves attempted more than 10 shots in this game. Part of that was because of the Cat foul trouble, surely. They had a bunch of guys who attempted between 7 and 8. In fact, I think 5 guys attempted either 7 or 8 shots in this game. So, but it was fine, right? He scored 41 on 27 shots. That's efficient. He only attempted 5 free throws. And I actually thought the officiating was pretty good. They got a bit foul happy late in the game on both ends. It wasn't unfair in any way. I just think, chill out with the foul calls, guys. Let them play, which always, by the way, letting teams play in any given game, for the most part, helps Minnesota because of how they play defensively. So that's always going to be my preference. And also just generally watching basketball. I'd rather watch guys play through contact and not get a call than a foul fest. And I mean, this crew was calling fouls in the final, literally 15 seconds of a 20-point game. It was just absurd. 15-point game, whatever. So anyway, Ant had 41, played extremely well. I was impressed with his performance. He had that one-handed, left-handed bank floater at the end of the shot clock late in the fourth quarter. That was just nuts. That's a tough shot to your strong hand, and to shoot that accurately with the right touch on the move is not easy. I mean, like anybody that's ever tried to shoot a running bank shot from an angle knows how hard that is to get the touch right, and to do that left-handed is just crazy. Every night Ant's doing something, whether it was, he banked in threes in Milwaukee and in LA the last 2 games before this one late in the game. It's just, it's incredible to watch him continually get better. Anyway, so he gets a stud in this game. Rudy also gets a stud. It was a little bit of an understated Rudy game just because the Wolves dominated. He played 37 minutes again. He's playing such heavy minutes for the Wolves, and it'd be really good to I don't know that it's going to be this next Portland game. I'm honestly a little bit worried. We'll talk about this on Thursday. A little bit worried about about this last game before the All-Star break for the Wolves, but hopefully Rudy could get a bit of a breath. I guess that's the positive to him not being involved in All-Star weekend, as frustrated it is that he didn't make the team. But he played 37 minutes, was 16 and 15 in this game, 7 of 10 shooting, got to the line 4 times, made 2 of his free throws, and was dominant defensively once again. Only 1 block this time, but controlled the paint, did his thing. I know DeAndre Ayton played well. He had Ayton shot 11 of 12 and had 22 and 16 himself. But like with the way the Wolves were defending with the zone and, high wall coverage early, I thought Rudy was good in this game, and I thought he deserves a stud. And then obviously Nickeil Alexander-Walker gets a stud in this game. 18 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists for Nickeil. We talked about his 6 of 7 shooting, 5 of 6 from outside the arc, and a very good defense. One of the few Wolves who I thought played well on the perimeter defensively in this game. I should point out the Blazers had under 100 points before garbage time, just like the Clippers on Monday. So, this game is going to help the Wolves' defensive rating, especially on cleaning the glass, which filters out that garbage time. But early in the game, the perimeter defense was shoddy. I mean, Scoot Henderson got too many free runs to the rim. Jeremy Grant didn't shoot the ball well, but he got to his mid-range jumper pretty much whenever he wanted in the first half. Anthony Simons, we talked about, hit a couple of tough shots, but also hit some open shots and got to the line too often. So ultimately, the Wolves defense was fine. It's just the perimeter defense early in the game wasn't great. I'm going to throw up the oh man, I didn't let's see. Let me see if I can quick pull up the game stats here. Yeah, I'll get it here in just a second. Throw them up here on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. But there we go. So the Wolves did outshoot Portland. They did a pretty good job defensively, again, contesting shots. The Wolves also shot a higher volume of threes than their opponent. This is, I believe, the highest volume of threes in a 3-game span since November. And of course, the Wolves are, or not just a 3-game span. I think if you extend it further, going back even before the Bulls lost, there were a couple games before that where they shot a ton of threes. It's like the last 5 or 6 games, they've shot a huge volume of threes. And, Rudy said that. Rudy had a comment like, hey, we need to shoot more threes. I've been talking about it on the show. I had multiple shows. I think one right after Christmas and then one mid-January where I said, hey, this offense, stop turning it over, shoot more threes. And if you fix one of those 2 things, it probably goes from a 17th or 18th ranked offense to a 12th ranked offense. You pair that with the number 1 defense with the bullet, and this is a phenomenal team. We're starting to see that conversion of shooting more threes and adding a Monte Morris to the mix, who's going to hunt his shot a little bit more and be a better 3-point shooter overall than McLaughlin. That's going to help. And Cat's been launching more lately too, and he did early in this game before he got into foul trouble. But anyway, the Wolves won the 3-point battle. And I, of course, flipped my turnover and rebound numbers, so those aren't accurate. But turnover-wise, the Timberwolves did win the turnover battle 16-12 in this game. I don't know what happened there with my numbers, which was huge. In a game where they didn't play well, to only turn it over 12 times. And Portland had, I think, 9 or 10 turnovers in the first half alone, which is huge. And it helped the Wolves kind of build that lead, which was, again, it was just 8 at halftime, but it helped them maintain that lead early when the offense was a bit clunky for Minnesota. And then the free throw battle, once again, huge for Minnesota. So getting to the line and not turning the ball over were really good. And rebounding-wise, the Wolves lost that. They were -3 on the glass, and they gave up 12 offensive rebounds to Portland. That was a bit of a concern of mine coming into this game for a team that's a good offensive rebounding team. And the Wolves, of course, trying to play zone a bit. So something else to keep an eye on. I know the Wolves' team defensive rebounding numbers are solid for the year, and no matter where you look, they're top 10 defensive rebounding-wise as a team. I still worry about that a little bit. And it's something to watch in the playoffs, too. Even with the pace slowing down, or I should say, especially with the pace slowing down, the Wolves need to make sure that they're good enough on the glass. And early in the game, Mike Conley was big. I mean, he finished with 4 rebounds. I think 3 of them were in the first quarter. Or I think all 3 of his defensive rebounds were in the first quarter, actually. The sort of thing that the Wolves guards last year and prior did not do, which is grab those in between rebounds, right? Those long rebounds. And so they need Conley to do that. They need Monte Morris to do it. They need Nah to do it with some consistency here. But anyway, that was one area where they struggled a bit in this game. But again, the lack of turnovers, the high volume of threes, and the high volume of free throws really helped the Wolves in this one. All right, that's all we have for you today. Of course, the Wolves are off here today on Wednesday. The next show in your feed is going to be the Minnesota basketball party, so check that out. Myself, Jack Borman of Canis Hoopus, Sam Ekstrom of Lockdown Minnesota, Ron Johnson of Lockdown Minnesota, and Reggie Wilson of Care 11 are going to talk Wolves and look ahead to the All-Star break. And, of course, lots of stuff Saturday and Sunday for the Wolves players involved. So that'll be the next show in your feed. Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about the Portland matchup and to a little bit of kind of a first half, unofficial first half recap of sorts, even though we're well past the actual halfway point. But anyway, we'll do kind of a 10,000 foot look at the year so far for Minnesota. And then Friday, I don't know that we're going to get into like too many predictions on Minnesota basketball party today. I'm going to spend a lot more time on All-Star weekend on Friday. It'll be fun. I love kind of handicapping the weekend. I did pick Cat to win the 3-point contest 2 years ago. And I'm not saying for sure not for sure picking him yet this year. I'm going to look at the odds and at FanDuel and see, who the best picks would be for Saturday's events. And then we'll talk about Sunday's game as well. So a big week here upcoming leading into All-Star weekend. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Also, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On. Plus, our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken. And of course, Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.